Hi, Ryan Hoover with Weichert Realtors, the 515 agency. Today I've got Will here. He's a first-time home buyer, wondering about the buying process and if it fits what his short-term strategy should look like. So we're going to get into a conversation here about what to look for, what the process is, and how it might fit what his plan is moving forward. So, how are you today, Will?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. So you're thinking about buying a house, is that right?
Yeah, currently I'm renting an apartment just while I'm here in college,
Mhm.
but in the next year or two, looking to buy a house and wondering what the steps are and like pros and cons of renting or buying.
Yep, I think the first thing that you would want to discuss is maybe less about the steps and more about your strategy. What is it a good idea to buy? Is it not a good idea to buy? And what is going to determine if it's a good idea to buy, right? So you had kind of said, you're maybe around for another year or two. Um, when I am talking to a young individual like yourself, all right, some of the things that I bring up are, uh, what's your what's your current situation? Are you married? Are you single? What is your situation as we speak?
Yeah, so right now, just have a roommate, single, not married, um, and looking to stay around Des Moines area, wherever that may be, whether it's out in the suburbs or somewhere closer to the downtown area. Um, but yeah, I think it's just there's a lot up in the air right now of where I'm gonna land and trying to figure out what my best strategy is moving forward.
Okay, so the next piece that I would ask is, what is your goal with purchasing this house? Are you purely looking for a place to live for the next 2 years, own and then sell in 2 years, or take the next step? Have you considered investing in real estate, holding real estate, adding to your real estate portfolio? What are your thoughts on what you do with the house after you purchase it?
So right now, the ideal plan for me or the strategy I would like to use is to potentially buy a duplex or a townhouse and rent out the units and live in the rest.
Hmm.
And then after I'm in a better financial situation, maybe 2, 3, 4 years down the road, and maybe life changes and we have a significant other in the picture, look into buying more of a starter home, first home that's not in the duplex townhome situation.
You bet. So, hearing that, I would tell you as a young individual, you're in a great situation. If you are at the point where you want to grow your portfolio, add real estate to your name, you're in a situation where you can move all the time, right? You can move regularly, and this isn't really a long term house, right? So, you had said you've got a roommate right now, whether it's a duplex or a townhouse or even a residential house. Um, would you be able to line up two or three roommates if necessary? If you purchased a home, would you be able to line up a couple of roommates to live with you?
Yeah. I mean,
Yep.
I have all of my friends that are in college or just people that I know that are the same age as me looking to kind of take that next step, either whether it's moving out of their parents' house or moving out of a college apartment, college dorm, something like that.
Perfect. So you're in a situation where I urge people to look at a route to go something like this. Uh, if you have the funds, have the ability, we can talk about how you get there, right? But from a strategical standpoint, you have the ability to go purchase a house right now and rent those rooms out and have a lot a lot of your bill paid, most of your bill paid, by the roommates that you have. Put yourself in a great situation, right? So now, instead of you paying your rent, right, you're actually purchasing a home and you're working on the down payment on that house, right, with
Yeah.
your payment every month. You're also looking at the opportunity to own an asset that's going to grow in value, right, every single year. Um, and then you're lowering your expenses along the way, right?
Yeah.
So, all those positive things. So, think about this. Let's take a step back and say, okay, what if I did this? And then what's my next move, right? Or um, what happens if I move out of the state or the city where I'm at, right? Um, if we get to the point where we're a year down the road and you're like, man, this was great. I want to number one, I'm getting a job somewhere, I need to move away, right? Well, you can manage it yourself from afar, or you can employ a management company to manage that property for you. Keep that in your portfolio, right?
Yeah,
And then wherever you're moving, you can decide to buy or rent there, right? But let's say you're staying around, and maybe you get a job, but you're staying in the community you're in. You're still young, still single, right? And want to add to your portfolio. A strategy that we look at is, well, if you've lived in that unit a year, all right, and you're going to move, if you have a reason to move, right? Whether that's closer to work, across the metro area, wherever that might be, there's banking restrictions on some of this stuff. But if you're going to move for a reason, your next place will be your primary house. And instead of staying where you're at and adding to your portfolio and having to put a full 20% down in a lot of cases, you can actually move for personal reasons, right? If you've been there a year, um, and and go put another, small amount of money down, purchase another place, rent this place, your first place out behind you, all right? And then now you're adding a second property to your future portfolio. And if you're still wanting some roommates at that point, you can do the exact same thing with the second piece. Now, as a young person, I have a lot of young people that move anyway, right? You might move apartment to townhouse to whatever that might be. This is no different outside of, yes, I have to bring a down payment check every time I buy a new house,
yeah,
right? And there are some restrictions from a mortgage standpoint and a legal standpoint, so we would have to stay in the confines of those, right?
yep,
We can't commit fraud and say we're moving, or call a next house a primary house if we're not technically moving into
yeah.
it.
That makes
But
sense.
there is situations that you can basically purchase your next property, rent the one out behind you, and slowly build a portfolio in your younger years. Um, and then let's say 27, 28, 29, you're at a different stage in your life, marriage, kids. Now I don't want to move every year. You can essentially look back and maybe have grown a real estate portfolio, of three, four, five, six houses, maybe even more, by doing nothing different outside of bringing a down payment check every year rather than putting a deposit down on a different apartment.
Yeah. So going with the building a portfolio side, are there any restrictions on? I know you said you had to live there a year.
Mhm.
Um, how many times could you do this within that year? So like 21 to 22, 22 to 23. Is there any restrictions on how many properties you can move into?
So you've got to move for a reason, and
Yeah,
I'm not 100% privy on the um, the mortgage restrictions, and those would be things that we would need to make sure that we're staying in the legalities and the confines of that. But as I understand it today, um, you need to stay with the intentions of, or need to purchase home with the intentions of keeping it your primary for at least a year. And then when you make a move, the move needs to be for another reason. All right. The move to move your primary, you can't just, um, I don't think legally you can just move across the apartment complex in the same geographical area,
yeah, that
right?
makes sense. What if it
Um,
was
it,
for a job or, like you said, a life changes, you have
mhm.
wife and kids,
Yep.
those fit into those legal bounds of personal reasons for leaving?
Yep, absolutely. And really whatever move you're making from a primary standpoint, you just basically have to have a reason that you're moving there, right? And to full disclosure, some people take this strategy and they take advantage of it, and they try and take advantage of the banks and the mortgage companies, and they commit fraud, and they lie about them moving into a property. So let's say, for example, we bought our first property and we're like, perfect, I want a second property, but I only want to bring 5 or 10% down, as opposed to the, pretty standard 20% down on an investment piece, right? Some people, I've this has happened before, where people have said, hey, you know what, Mr. Lender, I'm going to purchase this property and I'm going to move into it. But then ultimately they finalize the mortgage, they bring their down payment, they purchase the place, and then they never actually move into it as a primary, and they had full intentions of just renting it out all the way along. Technically, that's committing fraud, right? And that's not
Yeah.
something we want to do.
No, we don't want to do that at all.
And so there is some things that, with that strategy, we need to make sure that we're following the legalities and the requirements of um, not only the mortgage companies, but the mortgages or the paperwork and the um, the the issues that we're looking at, right?
Yeah, stay
What
within the
and
boundaries of the
yeah,
law.
we're not. I would never want a client or push a client to break a law or stretch the laws by any means. But the current setup would allow for this strategy for you to take advantage of putting yourself in a really good situation to build a portfolio. And that's not to say that you don't have 20% down or you don't have the funds to go buy an investment property. But when we're talking about investments, I want the dollars that I have in my bank account to stretch as far as we can, right? I want
Yeah,
if I've got $100,000 to use to buy houses, I don't want to put a full $100,000 on one property. I want to stretch that money into as many properties as I can, and this is a really good strategy to do that. Also, taking into account that why don't I buy a place and leverage some roommates as opposed to instead of us three going to an apartment complex and all paying rent, if we were going to do that anyway, why don't I see if they want to live with me and I'll purchase the place and they live with me and now I'm leveraging another situation there to push my real estate portfolio or start to build something.
yeah, and back to the point you said, you want your money that's in your account to stretch as far as you can,
Hmm.
in the sake of building a portfolio. Say that dollar amount is 100,000. I'd rather put buy 5 properties at 20,000
Hmm.
instead of one at 100,000.
Absolutely.
I feel like my return would be better on 5 different properties, and it helps with having less of all of your eggs in one basket type situation.
That's a good point, Will. And let's think about this for round numbers' sake. All right. Let's say option one is I'm going to buy $100,000 townhome, and I'm going to use all of my $100,000. Let's say I have $100,000 cash, right?
Yep.
And I want to invest. And let's say I've got two options. One is to use as much leverage as possible, or two is to basically buy cash. Or let's say one. Let's say one is the cash route. Okay, my one option is to purchase that $100,000 condo with every dollar that I have in my bank account, right? Or option two is I'm an investor. I want to buy multiple. I want to take that $100,000 and I want to put 20% down on 5 units. Okay. If you just think without really diving hard into the math from the surface level, there's three different avenues that I'm going to look at here. On the $100,000 down, you're going to create more cash flow because you're not going to have a mortgage. All right. Off the top of my head, all right, if you would finance $100,000, you're probably paying, let's just say, $500 a month in a mortgage, right? Depending on
Yeah.
what the current interest rate is, right? If you are putting $100,000 down on that property to own it, you're not paying that $500 a month. So that's $500 more every month that you're putting in your pocket, potentially $6,000,
Yeah.
a year that goes into your pocket more because you didn't finance it, right?
Hmm.
So we can just say $6,000 here on this property that we have for cash flow, okay, or extra cash flow. It's probably going to have more than that. So let's say we've got $500 just from not paying a mortgage. Let's say we use $200 more. So let's say we have $700 a month in cash flow here. All right. So that would be $8,400 a year that you're putting in on cash flow. That's one asset, or that's one avenue that we're looking at as an investment piece, right?
Yeah.
The second piece is that now after a year of owning that place, cash on a standard, let's say we appreciated 3%. So if we appreciate 3% of a $100,000 unit, that's 3,000 bucks, right? So if we add our overall return, okay, that now we've got $8,400 plus the appreciation in the unit, that's $3,000. Now we're up to $11,400. Are you following me?
Yeah.
Okay, the third piece is the mortgage pay down. Okay,
Mhm.
or I'm sorry, and in this piece we don't have a mortgage pay down. Okay, where the other piece we will, right? So
Yep.
so you're basically your net on $100,000 down payment is roughly 11.4% rate of return. You see how I got that?
Yep.
Because I put $100,000 down,
Hmm.
and then that year I gained back with my equity and cash flow 11.4%.
Yep.
See
So
where
that
I'm at
was
there?
option one,
That was
correct?
option one,
Okay.
right? The second option, if you use leverage, all right, and you go to the bank and loan a big piece of the money, now essentially what we're doing is we're going to go finance $80,000 each side, right?
Yep.
So on that, let's just take one unit for example. We're going to finance that. So now we're going to pay that mortgage of, let's say, $500. Okay, we're ballparking it.
Yeah.
Well, let's say we pay that mortgage of $500 now. So maybe we're only cash flowing $200 a month because I use $700 in this example, right?
Yeah.
So over here, $200, all right, a month times 12 is $2,400 of cash flow. See where I'm at there?
Yep.
Right. So on this unit, the cash flow piece is $2,400. Okay. On this unit, though, same as the other one, we appreciate it at 3%. $100,000 unit, 3%, 3%, right? So
Yep.
that's another $3,000. So now, all right, we're up to, what is that, $5,400, right? Is that where we're at?
Yep.
The third piece of this that the other one doesn't have is mortgage buy down or mortgage pay down, right? We're paying a mortgage and we're paying off what we owe every month. Granted, we're paying a lot of interest and we don't have a ton of mortgage pay down, but after a year on this, we're probably anywhere from $1,200 to $1,800 that we've paid down
Mhm.
in that. So let's just use $1,500 for example, right? So what do we have? We have $3,000 plus $2,400. So we're at $5,400 plus $1,500. So that's $6,700. All right, that we have on this unit. Okay, but now we've bought 5 of these,
Yeah.
right? So now we take 6,700 times 5. All right. I don't know what 6,700 times 5 is. Do you know the math on that? Well,
A little over 30,000.
right. So you're right around 30,000, give or take. We still use the same $100,000 to put down on these units, right?
Yeah.
So now we've raised ourselves from option A, which is maybe a safer play, and people don't want to finance, right?
Yeah.
People don't want to go to the bank and have the mortgage hanging over their head. But on option B, we went and leveraged and used this extra money and put ourselves basically with the same down payment of $100,000. We've gotten ourselves from an 11.4% rate of return that year up to over 30%
Yeah.
rate of return that year, right? So that's something to talk about. We kind of the reason we got here was being efficient with our money and using our money, right? And I think that the biggest thing to to lean back on in this conversation is I'm not the one to tell you, well, what your risk tolerance is, right? I
Yeah.
don't need to tell you what your risk tolerance is. I know what my risk tolerance is, right? But you can see the line we're on. This is super conservative and option A, right?
Mhm.
Option one. And option two, option B, whatever you want to call it, is probably as risky as you want to get,
Yeah.
right? And actually, to tell you the truth, that may not be as risky as you want to get because you may find a lender that'll go do it for 10% down, and then maybe your cash flow isn't as good, but maybe you can stretch 10% down, and maybe you can buy a sixth unit or a seventh unit or
Yeah.
an eighth unit, whatever that might be, right? And that's why I go back to on the investing side, every situation is different. That's why I urge every single person that I talk to, whether it's me or another realtor, another investment firm, whatever, whoever they're talking to as their professional to help them make these decisions, make sure you consult with them about what your situation is and what your goals are. Because the biggest thing is what's your long-term goal? Not just what are we doing right now and I want to buy a house. Well, let's strategically set up not only your first move, but if your first move falls in line with what your ultimate goal is, then we can knock down those dominoes as we go. If we're just looking at one step without assessing the ultimate goal, sometimes we can make a misstep.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's important, at least for first-time home buyers and people that are my age. It's just it's a market where I feel like there's not a lot of information out there until you're already too late.
Yep.
So I think it's healthy to have those conversations early to learn, especially because it is such a big part of life. Because everybody has to have somewhere to live. I think it's important to have that conversation and know there are other avenues and routes that you can take depending on your goals.
Yep, absolutely. I think you're spot on, Will. And actually, so to kind of wrap this up, in this case, all right, we went down maybe more of the investing side of things as a young person looking to buy your first house, where to go from there. But I think I want to reiterate that whether it's the investing route, whether it's really interested in purchasing real estate, or On the other side, I'm just looking to buy my first house. I think it's really important as a first time home buyer or someone really wanting to know more, consult with a realtor, consult with a professional, and really get your goals on the table to see what their opinions are and see where they can help. Hopefully this helps today with some of you first time home buyers. And if there's ever anything, if this is a conversation you'd like to have, reach out to us. You can see in the chat or in the the information below this video, how to get a hold of us. I would love to have that conversation. We've got several uh, professional realtors in our office that can walk you through step by step exactly what we talked about today. Thanks for watching today. Have a great day.